The hybrid powertrain has proven itself as the best solution, especially within this sort of mid-range segment. They happen to be a bit more luxurious because they're a lot smoother. They're also quite a bit more powerful than your entry-level gas models, and of course they're just a lot more efficient. If you look at last year's sales for the Honda CR-V, more than 50% of them sold were hybrids. So this is a segment that Mazda needs to tap into in order to stay competitive. And if you look at the new CX-50 hybrid, this is indeed a great competitor within the segment, and honestly, it's actually one of the better looking crossovers out there. Under the hood of the CX-50 is a 4th generation Toyota hybrid powertrain. In fact, it's the same exact one used in the RAV4 Hybrid, so you know it's gonna be incredibly reliable. Now, all-wheel drive is standard with this setup, and it outputs about 219 horsepower, which means it kind of sits in the middle of the CX-50 lineup between the 2.5 and the 2.5 turbo, except this gets 38 miles per gallon, making it by far the most efficient CX-50. Now, you might notice that this isn't quite as efficient as the RAV4 Hybrid, but keep in mind that this is kind of a slightly larger vehicle and quite a bit heavier, so that does kind of make sense. But thanks to piggybacking off of Toyota's hybrid system, this is actually more efficient than the Honda CR-V with the all-wheel drive hybrid setup. The CX-50 is a good looking crossover, and that's really where it separates itself from the everyday RAV4 and CR-V that we all see everywhere. It's got a much more rugged look, and it's so different from the CX-5 that I now understand why Mazda still sells the CX-5 and the CX-50, even though they kind of compete within the same segment. Compared to the CX-5, the CX-50 is wider, it's longer, it's got a longer wheelbase. However, it is a bit shorter and it sits higher off the ground. It's actually got an inch extra ground clearance over the CX-5, which really gives it a very distinct look. It's also meant to be more off-road oriented, as you can tell by all the black fenders around the CX-50. Over in the back, the CX-50 remains a good looking crossover, thanks in part due to these wide hips that give it a kind of nice wide stance to it. However, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of these fake vents. I think they could have done something a little bit nicer. Now, when it comes to cargo capacity, the CX-50 isn't exactly segment leading, but it's certainly more than what you'd need. It is a 2-row SUV instead of a 3-row SUV, so space isn't exactly a major problem. Now, in order to fold down the second row, all you got to do is pull this lever down and it easily folds down. And underneath the floor, unlike the CR-V, you get a spare tire, which is a nice thing to see these days. But even nicer is within the spare tire, you have a Bose sound speaker subwoofer, which is just a great way to use space in this car. Now, moving on to the back seats, and we have not exactly the most spacious backseat situation, but it's certainly doable. I'm 6 feet tall, I've got the front seat where I'd normally drive, and I still have about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches of legroom. The good thing is though, when I lean all the way back, I do get to enjoy a nice upright seating position, and my head isn't touching the ceiling, which is nice. However, it is close. My hair is scraping against the top. In terms of amenities, you do have 2 USB-C ports back here and some AC vents, and the nice thing though is you do get to enjoy the nice view from the panoramic roof. Now, one thing I really appreciate about Mazda is that they don't have a premium brand like Acura or Lexus that they need to contend with. So when it comes to things like interior quality and features, they kind of just go all out and give you the best that they can. This car comes with great features like ventilated seats and a panoramic roof and a heads-up display behind the steering wheel, which you won't find in a car like a CR-V or even a standard RAV4. Now we got to talk about some disappointing things, specifically the tech in this car. You've got the infotainment system, which is just not all that great, and the gauge cluster, which is just not that impressive either. When it comes to the infotainment system, you're kind of limited to this button and dial layout, and I have to say at first this is just terrible. It kind of leaves a terrible first impression on a lot of people, but it is something that you can deal with. However, I will stand by the fact that a touchscreen system is just a better system overall. The good news is that with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, you can control this system with a touchscreen. However, it isn't fully featured. There seems to be some kind of a glitch, or maybe it's just something Mazda didn't add, because when it comes to maps, you can't pan around using your finger. You have to use this dial system in order to pan around the map. When it comes to the gauge cluster, the fault isn't with its design. I think it actually looks pretty okay. It's just that it doesn't give you all that much information. You've only got 3 screens to choose from the digital digital display. You have this sort of analog display, which looks okay, and then you have an analog display with some information on the inside, but your information is limited to your fuel economy and your battery, and that's it. No entertainment, no navigation, and that's it. The final screen is your sort of driver assist screen, which shows you a really nice readout of your speed and the car, and that's it. Nothing else. I think it's kind of disappointing. However, the good news is if you get the fully loaded model, you get the heads-up display. The heads-up display on this car is great. It shows you everything that you need to know. It's got your speed, it shows you speed limit signs, stop signs, your navigation, what lane you need to be in, and it really is a good system. So I kind of can forgive this if you have a heads-up display, but if you don't have the heads-up display, I do think this kind of gauge cluster would be a little bit frustrating. All right, time to drive the CX-50 Hybrid, and let's just start with the hybrid powertrain because it is smooth, it is quiet, it is very comfortable, and I have been impressed. If you're going to compare this to something like the 2.5 turbo, it's not going to feel as powerful, but it does have more power than the base 2.5, so this is definitely the way to go for me, especially when you consider you're going to be getting so much better fuel economy. When it comes to things like engine noise isolation, it's not exactly the quietest system, but it certainly isn't all that intrusive. It is pretty good, it's not great. Now you do sort of have to deal with that kind of CVT drone if you are pushing it and accelerating really hard. Unlike the CR-V, it doesn't have those kind of emulated gear shifts. So that is kind of an issue, but I think for most people it's not going to be all that big of a problem. Ride comfort in this car is excellent. It's very comfortable. Even though this model has 19-inch wheels, I have been pretty impressed with how quiet it is, especially when it comes to soaking up road noise and driving on a hard surface road like this concrete road that I'm currently on. Now, to talk about the disappointing part about this car, and honestly, this might be a deal breaker for some because I think it might be a deal breaker for me, and that's that this car doesn't come with lane centering, specifically what Mazda would call, I believe, lane tracing. It only comes with lane keeping assist, and that's where if you're to veer outside of the lane where you're probably already out of the lane, the car will alert you and then steer you back into the lane as sort of an emergency measure. It does not center within the lane, and I kind of think that's a disappointment. It's even more disappointing by the fact that this car has a great active cruise control system, which I'm utilizing right now. It's following the semi-truck in front of me perfectly well. We came to a slowdown very smoothly, and it's weird because the Mazda 3 comes with lane tracing. This does not, and it's not sort of an exclusive problem to the CX-50 Hybrid. I believe it's also an issue with the normal CX-50s, which is weird. I don't really get it. And it's even more frustrating by the fact that the car is saying, hey, I see the car in front of you and I see the lanes on the outside of the car. As we've come to a stop, the car is telling me that, hey, I can't really see the left lane, which is understandable. Now I can't see any lanes, and it's just weird. Like, the car sees the lanes, why can't it just steer within the lanes? And that's just frustrating to me, especially in a modern car. You see, I've dealt with cars that have sort of frustrating or not good, not modern driver assist systems like the Honda Odyssey and the Honda Ridgeline. However, those cars kind of serve a different purpose. The Odyssey is a minivan, and that's why you buy an Odyssey. The Ridgeline is a pickup truck, and that's why you buy the Ridgeline. When it comes to this, you want it to be really good at this sort of all-around driving, and being able to center itself within the lane in a modern car for this kind of vehicle, in my opinion, should sort of be a requirement. To kind of wrap things up, let me know, am I overreacting, or would you consider this car regardless of lane centering? I mean, I think most people aren't gonna use it whether or not it's there or not. However, I really appreciate a car that can kind of drive itself on the freeway, especially a modern car, because it really eliminates driver fatigue. I don't need it to be a Tesla level hat trick, full self-driving, crazy automated system. I just want the car to sort of alleviate driver fatigue when you are driving, and having a good lane centering system paired with an excellent sort of active cruise control system that this car has, you can really eliminate driver fatigue on longer roads or just general freeway driving or driving through heavy traffic like I just was. Let me know if I'm overreacting, and yeah, with that, that's kind of wrap things up. So if you're looking for something different than a CR-V hybrid or a RAV4 hybrid, then you definitely should be considering a CX-50 hybrid. This car really gives you the best of both worlds. On the outside, you've got Mazda design, and on the inside, you've got Toyota's tried and true reliable hybrid powertrain. With that, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Mazda for loaning me the CX-50 for a week, and I'll see you on the next one.